All right, we're working on a new Gen 9.5, 2010-11. Any of these cars that got over 100,000 miles on them, the front ends start getting really loose in them, and they're going to need some attention. And Matt with Saab Parts is selling a kit now. In fact, there's one that we've already put together, getting ready to go back on the other side. But to get this apart, you've got your 24 millimeter nut and set up on the top you got to take off, which is right up in there.
A little retainer plate and then a nut that pinches it to the body.
Yep, and you got to take that off. We're fortunate we're using a hoist and a tranny jack here because it is kind of an awkward assembly, but you really only have to take off your end link right here. That's your top end link, and you'll get new end links with this more than likely, so you can take both of them out. Take the end link off and replace it while you have this whole yoke assembly out. It'll be easier to get at that bolt right there. But to take this out, really all you got to do is take off your top end nut and end plate. Then you've got to take this bolt out right here. That's the pinch weld, and the reason you take it out is the bracketry for the caliper. Caliper does come off right here with a nut,
14 and a 17 counter hold.
17 counter and a 14 nut. Then you can get a bungee and hang that off the side of the caliper. And then there's a bracket over here. On this one, we took the bracket, all the hardware electronics off of the bracket. In the future, just leave everything there. It doesn't really matter. As long as you can get access to your nut here or your bolt, you'll be fine. So all you gotta do is take the top off, take your caliper off, take your tie rod end off, and once you get the tie rod nut off the bottom, then just start hitting this with a hammer or with an air chisel, and that'll actually just pop right out. But it does take quite a bit of force. Then you've got your bottom control arm nut and bolt right there that you're gonna have to take off. And what else, Matt?
There's 4 things.
Axle nut,
yeah. The axle nut.
Yeah, then the axle nut. And
that'd be the last thing.
yeah, if you don't have an impact, loosen that up before you, if you can, loosen that up before you pick the car up off the ground. If you can get your socket and stuff through the inspection hole on the rim, be a lot easier.
Let's look at the other side with it off. You can see.
There is a little washer in here that you got to kind of watch as you go back together, that you keep that in place, because these axles don't slide in overly easy.
And then you can see on the sway bar on like 2, once this is all out, you can get your one off the sway bar itself.
Yeah,
much easier
with everything out of the way. When you pull this assembly out, it's just amazing how much space you've got. But again, the 4 things: take your top plate and bolt off. Here they are right there. And obviously they go on the top there. Then take your axle nut off. And I did have to use a chisel. You actually use an air hammer to kind of drive that back. That was stuck in there pretty good. But you could do it with a hammer and a flat nose chisel. Tie rod end. Lower control arm bolt. And the caliper, and that's really it. And again, I think if we did this again, we would not take all these electrical connectors loose from the bracketry, because there's brackets on the side here we took them all loose from, and you could leave them all. You only really have to unhook the one wire, and to unhook that, Matt will kind of show you there. That rotates.
You can pull it out once you rotate this little collar.
So the collar has a lock right here, so rotate it back clockwise, Matt. And then that slides in and locks, and that keeps everything from popping out. So now to get stuff pulled out, we got to pop that, spin it counterclockwise just a little bit, and there's some little dog ears in there that then move out of the way so you can unplug your wires. Okay. So it's actually a pretty simple process. I think two sets of hands are better just because of the weight with this. Again, we're using the tranny jack just to kind of support stuff. You can, when we put it back in, we hung it basically from the nut up above, hang that in place, hang your assembly, and then put your nut on up on top, tighten that up just a little bit so it can't fall. And then it's a matter of getting your lower control arm in place and getting your yoke up and trying to get this axle slid back in nice and straight. Carefully, you don't cut a boot. We found that as we came down too far with the yoke first, before we got the axle slid out, it would catch on the boot, and you could end up ruining a boot there. So, but it's really not too bad of a job. Just take your time. I don't have the axle spec on that nut, but that'll be a pretty good spec, probably 175, 2 1/4, but you'd have to check that and verify what for sure that is. Anything else you want to mention, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the initial things with putting this together was what other hardware do you need with it? And honestly, other than what comes with the kit, there's not much new hardware. There's going to be the sway bar end link nuts because they have a little nylon locking sleeve on them. So those will be new. And other than that, maybe an axle nut, but probably we'll see. But not too bad. And like I said, any of these cars over 100,000 miles, I tell anyone that any Saab you have today that has its original suspension still, it needs suspension. You might not realize until you drive it afterwards what a new suspension feels like, but something to really consider. And I think all these new Gen 9.5s are kind of getting to that.
And with Matt being able now to source this stuff, he's putting together a kit, which is a bunch of other parts that are all OEM style, but nothing is really available on the aftermarket as a kit like this. So this will be a unique feature.
Fully assembled like this, no spring compressor. I mean, that's the big thing.
Yeah, no spring compressor. And to get this out, there's a pinch weld in here. We'll show that real quick. So you just take that. That's your bracket bolt you've already taken out. And like I said, we'll leave these brackets hanging in the car next time. And then I just use a chisel is all I use. Take a flat nose chisel with this bolt out and just kind of wedge it in there. And that'll spread that apart, and this top piece will just
slide right in and out.
Yeah, in fact, if he pulled on it right now, it would slide right out too, real easy.
We get it up there.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. We'll leave it together.
Just take our word.
Yeah. So anyway, pretty easy work. So you can get your new Gen 9.5 feeling like a new car again.
Thanks.
Thank you for the support of esaabparts.com, because it does go, and the money, some of that money filters back in indirectly to the museum for support at the museum. So we appreciate that. And these do have a little, it's a Torx head in here that you got to hold sometimes to keep them from spinning. So just be aware of that. It's not an Allen, it is a Torx. All right, that's all I got. And don't take this loose because that's your camber setting. All right, so don't mess with that at all. You won't need to. But I would regardless. You spent this money on your front end, get it realigned when you're done. It's a cheap $100 or whatever you're going to do. Why burn up tires and have a crooked wheel and everything? So this is Tom from the Saab Heritage Car Museum USA and Matt with esaabparts.com saying so long.